Mr. Bucket.
That's right. I'm Mr. Bucket. I'm Mr. Bucket. Toss your balls in my top. I'm Mr. Bucket. Out of my mouth I will pop. I'm Mr. Bucket. We're all gonna run. I'm Mr. Bucket.
The game's Mr. Bucket. The first to get their balls into Mr. Bucket wins, but look out, because the balls will pop out of his mouth.
I'm Mr. Bucket. The balls pop out of my mouth. I'm Mr. Bucket. A ball is what I'm about. I'm Mr. Bucket. We're all gonna run. I'm Mr. Bucket.
Mr. Bucket from Milton Bradley.
Buckets of fun.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 41 of the Pseudo Nerd Podcast for October 14th, 2016. I'm your podcast host, Josh Kiser, and joining me at the tabletop today, Josh, I call dibs on the thimble, Haddix.
What's going on, everybody?
And Kyle, I roll snake eyes, Hoagland.
Clever. What's going on?
Not much at all. Just the usual Thursday with you bros, watching some enthralling Thursday night football as per usual.
I'll be honest. I know you already told us before that this was going to be like the beginning audio little clip was going to be a little shorter than what we're used to. I was actually a little bit like abruptly surprised of when you actually came in. I thought that was like 10 seconds, and then you were like, "Oh, welcome to the podcast." Not saying I'm not ready for this rousing topic that we're going to be talking about, but I was actually...
You're no more ready for this than you were when we talked about Vandal Savage, so...
I'll be honest, this might even be worse than Vandal Savage, just because I have a small disdain for our topic, but we'll talk about that later.
Small disdain. Well, our topic today coming up is we're going to be discussing board games, the revolution that is the new era of board games, and apparently also Hoagie's apparent disdain for such topic. So, should be a good one.
And Haddix is here.
You guys want to talk about Vandal Savage again?
I think we should talk about who is not going to be here in the next couple days. Might as well just break it in now and just make people aware and excited for the next couple weeks, Kiser.
This guy not ruining the surprise at the end of the podcast.
There's no... Dude, your rundown is like the fucking Lonesome Dove of rundowns. I didn't get down to the end yet. Still reading what we're talking about. You want to wait? Fine. We'll wait till the end of the podcast. And we'll make everybody just sit there on the edge of their seat to find out what's going to happen in the next couple weeks.
That's what we do here. This is a suspense.
That's right. We don't want to just ruin all the surprises right up at the beginning. We do that, and they're not going to want to listen at the end. This way, we keep them, waiting in anticipation for what kind of excitement we might be breaking here in a little under 60 minutes from now. All
right, well, wipe the sweat off your foreheads.
Kiser, this isn't 60 minutes, dude. This is a Pseudo Nerd podcast, all right?
With the viewership we get, sometimes I feel like it's as groundbreaking and as popular as 60 Minutes.
60 Minutes only gets a lot of viewership because it's like right after a football game. And you're like, I don't feel like changing the channel.
The worst part about that is every Sunday during football season, it's like at some point, whenever it's supposed to come on at like 6 or 7 or something, I think maybe 7. It's like, if you're here to watch 60 Minutes, you're watching the end of the football game. It'll start shortly thereafter. And they've said that for like the last decade. I feel like if you watch 60 Minutes...
to the West Coast?
You should know.
They always say, like, unless you're on the West Coast, then it's just the news. And I'm like, awesome, I don't have to watch 60 Minutes.
But I feel like anybody who's there watching 60 Minutes, like, should know at this point, football season, I've got an extra 20 minutes to play with before 60 Minutes starts.
All these minutes, man.
They should call the show 40 Minutes during football season, right?
Couple of minutes.
So we'll just get into the board game discussion now. The reason I kind of proposed this topic, and it was, again, how we discussed last week with the streaming services, that was sort of, Hoagie came up with the idea, as we were all trying to figure out what our topic for last month would be, and Haddix's choice of DC movie universe won out, my suggestion was board games and things of that nature. And for me, it's I thought it would be a good topic to discuss because it is quite popular these days. There's been a giant rise in popularity of board games, and it's sort of a new era, or a board game revolution, as I like to call it.
I've never heard you call it that, but
you've said it. You've now said it, I think 4 times, and it is the title of the rundown.
See, at least Hoagie's gotten through the title of the rundown.
I have. I'm on line 4. I just got past the date.
Oh, there you go. So I thought it'd be a good topic, and I guess we can jump right into why and I get you guys' input as well, think it has become so popular these days, because there really has been a rise in popularity of board games. And I think it starts really with the, just our development as a society with the advent of the internet and the adaption of nerd culture. And it sort of kind of all goes hand in hand, because a lot of these games have sort of that nerd feel to it. They have that strategy, that RPG elements in a lot of them. Things that are, maybe 20 years ago would be, these dorks are playing, Dungeons and Dragons. Well, now you're playing a board game that has those sort of elements, but it's like cool because the internet has made it cool. And with, Lord of the Rings coming out and Game of Thrones and all these fantasy things that are cool, it's more well received, I think. And I think that's part of the main reason that it has grown popular is that there's a lot of interest in just the environment around it. It's probably not the right word I want to use, but that sort of culture is accepted these days.
Yeah, the whole being a nerd and getting made fun of our younger days has completely gone away. I feel like it's like cool to be a nerd these days.
That's what happens when you get rid of bullying.
But I mean, it's not even just that it's an accepted thing anymore or whatever. It's like there's people who aren't really nerds who like try to act like they're nerds. I mean, and I don't know how you really define that, but it's become very mainstream.
Well, I think you got to kind of define who are the people making board games these days. I think that's the reason why we're getting a lot more of these smarter games, is because kids our age, and that's a weird thing to say, but when we were kids, you can only play Trouble and Sorry and Monopoly so many times. And then as you get older and you start getting into the things that the 3 of us are actually into, the idea of making a board game adaptation of some of those elements is very, very interesting. And I think it also meant to do with the fact that maybe when you were younger, it might have been shunned in something that they said people might have made fun of for being a nerd. But now that you're a grown ass man, it's a lot easier for you to say, hey, let's make a game that we would actually enjoy playing, and we have the resources to do it, and Kickstarter now exists and all that stuff. It's a really awesome avenue to take a lot of creative ideas and make really interesting games out of it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that with the help of YouTube and blogs and things like that on the internet, there's been people have gotten more visibility on games and learned how to, what people like. They review games. For instance, Will Wheaton, one of the biggest guys known in the nerd culture these days, he has a tabletop YouTube show where, they basically have a season. It's 20, 25 episodes, and he plays a different game, and he brings other celebrities on, Seth Green and people from Star Trek and, all these different actors and things like that get on there, and it's like, oh, this is cool. And then you watch them play the game, and while it sounds like, oh, who's going to want to sit around and watch, 3 or 4 people play a board game? It's because it's not, you're not watching grandpa and your uncle and your sister sit there playing Monopoly. You're watching some celebrities, they're joking, they're having a good time, and they're playing these interesting games. So it's definitely, I think, has helped grow it even more, and it's sort of laid the foundation for, getting together and playing these games. And I was curious myself what made it so popular. And one of the ideas that was brought up was somebody thought, video games, from the 90s, into the early 2000s, you plan to play a multiplayer game, you played split screen, you think of the GoldenEye on the N64, 4 people sitting around playing that. Now you don't have that. If you want to play Call of Duty with your friends, everybody sits at home and plays it. And if you go back and listen to our video game month podcast, we actually discussed that as one of the cons, is you don't have that face-to-face interaction when you play video games anymore, because a lot of it is just you're playing on your own screen against other people around your friends, whatever, they're at home. So for this, board games kind of helps fill that gap. If you want to sit there and play with your friends, you can do it now, around a table together. And it's a way to play these more competitive games than playing Sorry or something like that.
Nope, definitely agree. I think the only thing that I've always felt, I guess, I wouldn't say I'm scared. Scared's the wrong word. But some of these games they can be a little bit intimidating. I mean, especially if you're trying to introduce people to this new era of games. And like I said, I know, later we might talk about we always talk about the pros and cons of things like this. But I said that one of the things, it's fun to learn a new game. So you got to you got to lure people into the idea of, hey, we're all going to experience this new game together, especially if you just open the box for the first time and everybody is going to be pretty lost into it. And I don't know if it's better that way, where you have everybody who's reading the rules together. And because, back in the day, like a lot of those games, you didn't need to read the rules for it. It was, you roll the dice, you go X amount of spaces, and then you flip a card and you do what it says. But that's not these kinds of games. So I always wonder, like, is it more fun to have everybody on the same plane, or to have somebody who's played the game a few times be able to answer questions quicker about, like, oh, can I make this move? Can I do this move? And I don't know. I was always like, that was one of the questions I was going to ask you, Kiser, was like, when you play games like this, do you appreciate having a guy, like, just like that one guy that's like, oh, I've played this game a bunch, and it's almost like having like a dungeon master in Dungeons and Dragons. You want to have the guy who's the best at the game is your dungeon master. It should not actually be a player. The player should be the guy who's really never played before.
I mean, I see where you're coming from there. For me, as far as like learning a new game, it's nice to have somebody who knows what they're doing with the game, at least from a, initial standpoint. But I think, as far as answering how do I play it or this or that, like, that's one thing I've liked about these, YouTube and the internet now is you can go, I don't know, these rules are a little vague. Back in the 90s, you just kind of, it was house rules. What makes sense here? Whatever you guys want to do, let's do it. What sounds good? Okay, we'll do that. Even if it was way off. And, sometimes now, like, people say Monopoly takes 14 hours to play. Well, in truth, if you played it by the rules that Monopoly actually has written down, the game should take 45 minutes to an hour, because things go straight into auctions, and you don't get all this money every time you do all this stuff. And, people have different things. If you land on parking, you get all the money in the middle of the pot. And there's a lot of those rules that just those aren't real rules. And, if you watch YouTube videos now, if Monopoly just came out today and you watch these YouTube videos, you would see how people play. You're like, oh, okay, that's how I play it. And then you go back and you play it with your friends that way. So it's kind of nice to have this avenue to see how games are meant to be played, where we really didn't have that luxury, 20 years ago.
I don't think I've ever seen a winner in Monopoly. I've probably played at least 20 times. I don't think I've ever seen I've seen people get knocked out. I've never seen a winner take all, like, winner yet in a game of Monopoly. I mean, we played like the park, once again, like you land on parking, you get a ton of cash. So it always seems like if you're ever down and out, you can just easily get back in by landing on free parking.
Yeah, and those are just house rules that for some reason people thought, it gets adapted at one point and everybody starts playing it, and then they tell their friends, oh, this is how you're supposed to play it. Next thing you know, there's just these variations of the game that really aren't meant that way. And, now with these new era of games, you don't have, a lot of these games that we played as kids and then, as our parents maybe played growing up and things like that. It's, you roll a dice, you move a piece around the board. It's the first to get, around the board or first to get all their pieces to a home base, and maybe you jump on somebody and send them back to their home. I mean, a lot of those are variations of one another. Parcheesi and Trouble, they're like the same game. Sorry's right there. They're all very similar. And even the ones that get a little more, involved, like a Clue or Monopoly, are still pretty basic. I mean, you could sit down and teach somebody how to play most of those games in 5 minutes. Where these games now, there's a lot more involvement, a lot more strategy. There's so much you can do with them. And I'd like to get your guys' input, like what you think, why is it that, there's games have developed in such a way that they have? What do you think?
I think we just want something a little more challenging. I mean, playing Monopoly, like I love categories, okay? But it's a very basic game. It's a very simple game. And if you're getting together and playing board games often, things that are that simple could get very boring. To whereas if you got together with a couple buddies and played one of these newer games, the games can last hours, and the game, from game to game can be very different compared to a game of Sorry or even Monopoly. It's going to be very similar every time, other than you're going to have
it's very cookie cutter, and then depending on just who rolls the dice, it's the same. Exactly. It's very similar. There's not a whole lot of strategy involved to those.
Yeah, it's just very very basic. So while it might be scary to try some of these new games, or because they're so in depth, or you might be scared that you won't catch on as quick, it just brings that complexity that I think this day and age people like. They want to be challenged when they're doing things instead of just rolling a die and moving 10 spots and then passing the turn.
I think this also opens up the world of, like I said, I don't know if there's a stigma to it, but a lot of these people who like these games, I mean, you can call a lot of the nerd culture or whatever, but it also creates a social. It creates a reason to have like a social night out where you have people come over and play these board games. Because when we were kids, or even just in our like early adolescence, usually we wouldn't everybody come over and go and for the sake of playing a board game. The board game always became like I'm bored. What do you want to do? Oh, let's pull out, I don't know, like
Pictionary or something.
Pictionary or anything like that. And it always became kind of like, because those are the types of games where it's like, okay, I've got an hour to kill. Let's play a certain game. These types of games, it's almost like, hey, let's get everyone bring your, favorite 6-pack of beer. We'll get some chips and stuff and maybe order a pizza, and we're going to just play this one game, maybe two. And you would make like a whole day out of it. It's almost like, why would you, that's the reason why a lot of bars there's a lot of like these types of themes for bars now. And I know there's one out near where you guys live. I think I moved right around the time it was starting to get popular.
It's called
as far as tabletops,
or
Quest.
Side Quest, something like that.
Yeah, Side Quest.
Side Quest. Which is clever as hell, by the way.
But like that's one of those things where you're gonna have to devote a night. That's an evening of doing that, and I think that also helped a lot of people who maybe aren't big into going to the bar or going to a dance club or going somewhere where it's loud and maybe it's not the kind of people you want to hang around with. You might not run into a lot of people that are down for Carcassonne or Bang or Cones of Dunshire, even though it's a made up game. Like you're not going to find that at in East Ninth or in the Flats, on the dance floor too much. So it's a lot of these have become just popular because it gives people like that who have a similar interest actually creating a social night to get out of the house and meet people and make new friends.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the games themselves are part of the reason why they're, like you said, you can make an evening out of it. Almost like back in the day of Dungeons and Dragons, like that was like a hey, it's Friday night, 4, 5, 6 guys are getting together, and their whole evening is spent doing a campaign, and like I said, it was dorky back then, but now it's sort of that feeling like, hey, we're gonna spend the evening playing Settlers of Catan or something like that, because each one is gonna take, an hour and a half, depending on the game. And I think part of the, on top of just the social aspect of it, I think we as gamers have, demanded, as video games have advanced throughout the years, you look at what Mario Brothers was on the Nintendo, and you compare it to the games now, there's so much more going on. So, it's not just the basic jump on a monster and it dies kind of thing. There's more strategy. It's 3D. You got involved, all kinds of different aspects to it. Board games in turn have also been demanded to change and adapt, because you're not, if you think about it, like you play games now, nobody's like pulling out, Sorry, and it's like, hey everybody, why don't you come over Friday night, we're going to play Sorry. Like, it just doesn't happen, because that's just not, that is a game, like you said, Kyle, that you play when you were bored and there's nothing else in the closet, and that was what you guys wanted to do.
Yeah, you had a couple board games to almost, like, that was your backup plan, where, especially like if you go over to, I think the best example is going to see family, and like for Thanksgiving or Christmas or something like that, and then after you have dinner and you open up the gifts, and then the adults go, do whatever they do. Maybe they have they play cards or something like that with the adults. Then you've got the rest of the cousins and everything. And it's like, well, what do you want to do? And then that's always been like the thing you default to.
Yeah, it's like, oh, we got Monopoly here, or we got Sorry, and there's a deck of cards if you guys just want to, play Go Fish or something like that. I mean, that was, like you said, that's just sort of what was, you almost just had those games in the closet because they bought them at some point. You didn't buy it because you were planning on playing it all the time. You bought it as just like something to do if nothing else was going on. And I think that's the difference now, is these games you buy with the anticipation that, like, hey, like, we're going to spend an evening playing this, or we might spend a couple days here and there. Like, I plan on playing this and making a night out of it when I get these games. Like, that's the focus of the night, is to play these games, where before those were just something to do.
Yeah, they've become the social centerpiece of the night, is the game itself.
Absolutely. And, you brought up a point earlier about Kickstarters. I think that's one of the reasons, too, with, why we are able to have so many of these games, and why we're able to get a variation, because back in the day, there's no Kickstarters, none of that. It's, Hasbro, Milton Bradley, Parker Brothers, whatever games they made, you were, and they might make 3 games a year or something like that. Those are your options. Now you've got, Kickstarters, indie companies, things like that. Everybody, Kyle, if you wanted to make a game tomorrow and you had a great idea for it, you could post a Kickstarter, and no one could fund it. But if they wanted to, they could.
I feel like Hougie would be Lily's dad from How I Met Your Mother, where he makes all those horrible board games.
Mine would be circled around like finding like a Wendy's bacon mushroom melt or something like that.
A Big Buford.
I've never had a Big Buford.
The hunt for the McRib.
Not to get off track, back to what you were saying though, like in defense of Milton Bradley and Hasbro's and all that stuff when we were growing up, when you're a big company like that, you have to make games that will appeal to the masses. You have to make a game that,
absolutely, yeah,
for the most part, a younger kid, I mean, maybe not a baby or a toddler, but a younger kid can play as well as an adult, hence the battleships and things like that. But the Kickstarters allow people to be more narrowed in, or, on a particular group of people. This is directed towards young adults.
Right. They're not planning on selling it to, 5 million people. They're just
exactly.
And, one interesting aspect, Kyle, I think you wanted to touch base on, is how video games and board games have kind of adapted to one another.
I mean, nothing is more annoying, and I said this is where my little disdain section kind of comes in. Is last time I was at my mom's house, and she has a couple board games. Every one had a couple pieces missing. Every single one of them, like, especially those games where I think Categories is a good example, and she also has a game called Careers. Yahtzee's a good one. Remember when they like you had scorecards or little
score pads? Yep, right.
Yeah. Like, let me ask you this. If you run out of pads and categories, is there still actually a place right now I could like send a letter and they'll send more category pads?
I don't know.
Or just start ripping out pieces of paper.
To be fair, I've just used regular, college ruled pieces of paper and numbered it accordingly because I thought that was fine for that. But I would guess if 15 years ago when that was more of a problem, if you weren't going to just grab a sheet of paper and do it. I would imagine, you would either try to have to I can mail it in, and if I put a self-addressed
I know for a fact
envelope, you could.
It's there,
but now
I wouldn't. Offices are there anymore.
No, but I bet you
there are printable.
That's what I was just going to say. I bet you now, if you went online, you could find printable ones that you could use.
Yeah.
So that's just kind of like the tip of the iceberg, but the whole missing pieces thing, I remember they went through like a generation, almost like 5, 6, 7, 8 years of games where they were using like Play-Doh. And I thought that like, that's just like the beginning of the end of buying games. Like, I don't know if you guys ever played the game like Splat or even like newer games like Cranium.
Yeah, that's the problem with that. Like, especially, it's fun playing with clay, like even in Cranium and stuff like that. Like, newer games have a little bit of that. But, yeah, I mean, within a year or two, that clay just gets rock hard.
I mean, after a while, anytime you draw the creativity card, you're like, well, I have to draw a fucking new one because the clay is a rock, at this point. And Splat was the same thing. Like, you use Play-Doh to make
Grape Escape.
Bugs.
Do you remember Grape Escape?
Grape Escape's another good one. Like, they just went through this, like, period where I feel like you have exhaustible resources. And after a while, you either, like, just don't play it anymore, or you have to, like, for Christmas, I'm going to
go out and buy Play-Doh.
Or get more Play-Doh. But that's always the thing I like about the adaptation of video games is that you can play these games. Monopoly is a good example. I know they've done a lot of that. Game of Life is another big one, where there's a lot of small pieces, but there's a lot of pieces that are easily either eaten by the dog or lost in whatever reason. And it's nice to have video game adaptations where you don't have any type of cleanup. And, like the other example I had on here was, have you guys ever played,
so when you say that, you're talking about like playing Life, the game of Life, on a video game system as opposed to playing the
it's like just put your name
physical
in, pick
board
your favorite
game.
color, and the game's ready. It's there. There's no setup. There's no teardown. There's no like the cat jumped on the fucking table, and
it's not like when you were playing
off the table, Huggy.
But Risk was probably like,
it's not.
I love Risk. Right now is by far my favorite board game of all time. You can quote me, unquote. That is my favorite game of all time. However, nothing is more like infuriating than something happening that causes the pieces to move around. Like, you almost have to like catalog or take a picture of the board, and then you can put it away and then put everything back later. But to me, like,
there's a great Seinfeld episode about
can take
that.
Days to finish up like a serious game of Risk.
Yeah, no, you definitely can. That's one of the few.
When you're playing with all those pieces on the board, you're taking a risk.
I
knew that was coming. that softball was just lobbed up there waiting for somebody to take
so
it.
What they've created now is like these video game adaptations. Once again, like the Jackbox games. I don't know if anyone's ever played You Don't Know Jack, which is like a trivia game on the computer. Those same guys made like these party pack games for the PlayStation that are like a lot of games that have already existed, like there's like a video game version of Balderdash that they, that has their own, their own spin on it in a sense. But it's like playing a board game or like a trivia game or something like that. And the game is on the screen, and then you use your smartphone to join like a room. Like, you go to jackbox.tv, and then the game on the TV will give you like a 4-digit code. You enter it on your phone, and you put your name in, and it shows up, and it registers yourself in that game on the screen, and you use your phone as like a buzzer for different things that you can do, whether it's trivia or different other things. And it's just really cool because there's no setup whatsoever, nothing gets lost. and it's something that you can move on from, and they're short games. And I'm fine with playing a game for an hour or two if it calls for it, but you gotta still appreciate some of the, the quick and easy, games that might just take like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, but you get a lot of fun and a lot of laughs out of it.
I will agree with you on a little bit that, about missing pieces and stuff like that. Either can one prevent you from playing the game altogether if you're missing a crucial piece, or, degrade the game slightly. But there's something about actually playing with physical, pieces.
Yeah, there definitely is.
That's staring at a screen.
That's what I was going to say. As he started bringing up Splat and Grape Escape and stuff, like, there's games like 13 Dead End Drive back in the day. Like, that game took an hour to set up, but it was fun. Like,
Mousetrap.
It was fun, like, hitting a button and, causing a knight to fall. Or in the point of Mousetrap, you do something and, like, watch the whole thing kind of run its course. So, I mean, like, there is something for it, but, like, granted, like you said, Kyle, if you're missing a rubber band, your Mousetrap's busted or something like that. So there's definitely some annoyances behind it, but I agree with you, Haddix. Like, once in a while, like, it's fun to have that physical, those pieces, the tangible stuff. And the only thing I'd say to the downside of the video game aspect is, to me, you're not going to have the social evening of having everyone over and playing board games. You're not going to have everyone over to play Life on your PlayStation, that kind of thing.
I don't know, like, as long as it's not playing it on an actual PC, because that would be weird and awkward, like, everyone just sitting around, like, a small, like, computer screen. But if you're in a living room that's got, like, a nice big, TV, everyone's sitting on, like, a sectional couch, just relaxing on a couch, having some chips and drinking a beer, and then just, everyone's still being social and doing whatever. And I don't know, like, they're just, I don't know, I totally understand the whole idea of having, like, the physical pieces and being at a table, everyone surrounding and being around the table. That's kind of more of the
It brings that old school, like, that traditional kind of feel to it.
Yeah. Right. And I guess my other side of the disdain is that I don't always need that. Obviously, if I can play,
this guy wants everyone laying around on a couch together.
No, but there are some games, like I said, that just, I think are just so much nicer to play. Scrabble, I think, is a good one. Like, that's not a necessary game to play on the table. If, like, that's the reason why games like Words for Friends and stuff like that were so popular. It's like, oh, I can play Scrabble and I don't have to fucking set it up. Awesome.
And it's easier to keep score because it's all done for you.
Yeah, and you don't have to, like, challenge people with a dictionary. It's just, things like that where it's like, if you're smart about it and you create the right game or you make the right adaptation with the right game, then it's just one of those things where it's like Head and Shoulders. You should, if you have the opportunity.
That's
to play
a shampoo, not a game.
Damn it, Kiser! I was waiting for him to finish.
Well, that's your problem. That's your fault. He never lets me finish. What makes
that's
you
true.
think that he was
I was trying to be a little bit, nice.
No, I'm rambling
once in a while.
So we can move on.
Let me ask you guys. Discussing going back more to just the new era of video games, the new era of board games, the Settlers of Catan of the world, and games like that. What do you like about it? We've kind of discussed some of the aspects of it, but what is it that, to me, comparing it to the old board games, what do you like about these new games?
I think it's fun that you can make an evening out of it. That you can say, hey, why don't you guys come over? We'll play this video game. Jesus Christ, guys, you got it stuck in my head too.
You're welcome.
We could play this board game, and I mean, it's gonna be the evening. Like, we're not gonna go over there, play a game for 45 minutes, and say, all right, well, we're gonna play again. What are we gonna do now? It's hey, we're going over there. We're gonna play this game all night. We might not even get this game done, technically.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
A little kind of offshoot of the board games. We would go to your parents' garage and play Magic for 8 hours after work. It'd be like 5 a.m. and your dad would be like, "What the fuck are you guys still doing awake playing games out here?"
Right, and that's not something that you would. And I think that this holds true even for 40 years ago. I don't think there was a point ever where the generation our parents' generation or something like that ever said, hey, we're going to invite the Smiths and the Jones over Friday night to play Parcheesi. Like, I don't think that was a thing. And, I like you said, I think these games embrace the idea that is going to, you can make a night out of it. Like, that is a thing, where I don't think the old games ever did that, because, you might play 2 or 3 games and it's fine. And then after a bit, you're like, well, that's, you can only play so much Sorry or Trouble before, that's it.
I feel like they were going the route of, all right, no one wants to be sitting down playing this game for hours, so let's make them fun, quicker paced games, hour max. You know what
Absolutely,
I mean?
Yeah.
And nothing, and not a game that someone's going to have to like explain the rules for the first half hour. You play Sorry or Trouble or Parcheesi or even Monopoly, even though I got my own hatred for that game just because how long it can take. But those types of games are globally understood for the most part how to play.
Yeah. And, so with these new games, like you said, Kyle, that is one thing, is that there's more rules to these games that take a little bit more to learn, but that's because they're more involved. And for me, that's a good thing, but it also, because they're more involved, there's more skill involved too. So as someone like myself, I'm a very competitive person when it comes to board games. I take this shit seriously. That's also why
talk to my wife. I don't play games anymore.
And for me, if we're playing, we just keep saying Trouble and Sorry because those are just the easiest ones to use as examples, and it's ones that everybody knows. If I play Trouble, at the end of the day, there's like really no thought. I'm just pushing down that pop-o-matic bubble in the middle, and I move my pieces accordingly if the dice is rolled that way. But if you play some of these newer style games, it's like you really have to strategize, like, okay, do I do this? Or maybe I hold off here, maybe I make this move, or I make this move because my opponent could be doing this. Like, there's a much more thought involved. And if you're skilled at that particular game, more often than not, you're likely to, come out ahead. Or if you're playing with other skilled players, like it's a much more, you're really it's like playing chess in a, but in a board game atmosphere, where when you're playing Trouble or something, it's just like you're rolling, it's like playing Yahtzee. You're rolling a dice and it is what it is.
I'll say, yeah. There's no strategy involved at all. It is literally luck of the roll, if you will.
But then you got to try and explain that to your significant others, where like, if let's say you play like Uno or something like that, if you win like 2 or 3 games in a row of Uno, it's like, there's no skill to that game. Yeah, there's some choices you can make, but for the most part, it's like, all right, do I play the red 7 or the blue 7? Like, there's no, it's so random that most of your choices that you make are like what you have in your hand and what you can draw has already been decided for the most part. So you're just kind of playing that out until someone's done, and there's really not a whole lot of skill. So yeah, these other games are really nice because there's strategy involved, and then if everybody on an even playing field, it's also fun because it's like you could play a game 10, 20 times and you can have a different experience in all of them. Yeah, the game's the same, but it doesn't mean that there's still that randomness to those games. So there's a lot of playability with these new games, and not just like, I've played Sorry a bunch of times, but it's, the ending is usually the same in the sense of like, okay, this is how you win. But there's a lot of board games now where there's not always just one way to win. There's, you can either like, it's kind of like playing games like Civilization or stuff like that, where you can either wipe out your opponents, you can have the most money, you can have the most culture points. There's a lot of different ways that you can pull off a victory. That's not just like a game where you just dominate the board. You don't have to dominate the board to actually win.
Right, and it kind of to piggyback off of that, with the way that there's Kickstarters, indie developers, there's all kinds of different companies making games. The selection is a lot bigger, and in turn, there's like you said, there's certain games that may have multiple ways of winning, and then there's even some games it's like it's a team effort where the 3 of us sit down and play a game. We're not playing against each other. We're playing against the you want to think of it as the board. We're playing the game itself, and
it's time to play the game.
I can't think of the name. I want to call it like Treasure Island or something like that, but it's not. But basically there's an island that, the three of us are trying to, 3, 4, 5 of us, whatever, are trying, we each have certain abilities we can do. And the idea is we want to collect the treasure before the island sinks. And based on cards that are pulled, the water rises and, different tiles get flipped over and we cannot access it. And, we might play it 15 times in a row and never beat it. So it's, like you said, there's different ways to play the game. And every game is different, because of that.
I think I know the game you're talking about now that I'm thinking about it. There was they made one, I think, based on Robinson Crusoe. It was like Adventure on Island, Adventure on the Cursed Island or something like that. Where it was that, I think that's how that game was played, where you had your own, like one person had a particular ability and lacked in others, and that other people helped pick up the slack of other things.
Forbidden Island. I just looked it up. Forbidden Island was one I was thinking
Forbidden
of.
Island?
Yeah. And there's a couple other that are like that, but that's just one that came to my mind that, is different from the others.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever played any, not like a lot of the co-op games, I think that's what you would call it. And I think that just has to do with the fact that, a lot of us are just competitive assholes, and it's good to beat the people that you're playing with. Right.
And well, if we played together and you screwed it up for us, then I would just get mad at you in a different way. So, it's all fair. We can still be competitive in certain aspects, even on the co-op games. But that's it. There's a ton of variety now with this. Back in the day, it was very, very similar with the Clue and the Monopoly of the world are sort of the different ones. But other than that, a lot of them are just dice, move around a board with some pieces kind of games. So there's a lot of variety here. Adventure games, resource management, your role-playing games. You still have some luck games, and then there's still the party games and things like that. So there's just a lot to choose from. That said, there are some downsides to this new era of games. For me, it's, we kind of talked about even, Splat and, Mousetrap and things like that. There is a little bit of nostalgia to some of these old games, and that's killed. None of these indie developers are going to make a game where you roll a dice and move pieces around the board anymore. Like, that's just not going to sell. So it's really killed the old games. And if you want to play anything like that, you really just have to buy the old games. And thankfully, Milton Bradley and stuff's probably still printing and creating, Sorry to this day. So you have that.
Yeah, all the different versions of Monopoly, like your Lord of the Rings Monopoly, all that kind of shit.
It's always funny to see like the new, when they repaint or rebrand old games, but then like every once in a while somebody busts out like their version of Trivial Pursuit from the 50s, and it just feels like it's made out, like the board's made out of wheat.
Because your parents have a bunch of fucking board games, old board games.
Oh yeah, we have 75, 80 board games, and I'm not exaggerating.
Shelf of yours, I feel like one day it's just gonna crack, and it's all that is gonna fall down. Your parents have so many. I think every time I go over and I go in your garage, I always stare at Nightmare, because every time I'm like, I want to play that. Like, very, very soon, I want to play Nightmare. For those that don't know what Nightmare is, go fuck yourself. It's an awesome board game. But
you need a VHS player to play it, so.
Yeah, that is one of the only problems.
Which is awesome.
You have an hour to beat the gatekeeper, and the way you beat the gatekeeper is basically hitting stop on the VCR. By going through the board.
That's
and
right.
Like that.
You gotta pause it. You gotta pause it before the hour's up, and he kills you and brings you to hell.
Back to what you're saying though, guys. I think that my pro to these new board games of spending a whole night playing them is also a con. That's possible to have the same thing, be a pro. And
sure.
a con.
No, I can see that.
You're not going to show up to a party and just, I guess I shouldn't say you never. You're rarely going to show up to a party and be able to get everyone on board to just play one of these games. It's like, I wasn't really planning on playing it. I don't know how long we're going to be here. Yada, yada, all that.
Well, it's also a mood changer with a party. If you're going to like somebody's party and you're like, I'm going to bring a game, and then you bring over Settlers of Catan or something like that, like that just changes the mood of the whole party, and like the person who's hosting it might not have been like, that's not the kind of like party we were trying to throw. You're really changing the dynamic.
This isn't one of those parties, all right, man.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, we got ladies here, guys. All right, we got ladies here.
Yeah, there's always then you become that guy.
In all seriousness, though, like women enjoy these games as well. Like that's one thing. Like there's variations. Like this is not just a dude thing either. You know, I just want to throw that out there for any ladies that might be listening. Like there's a lot of good board games that are good for all ages that in this new era. Like, and they're not designed just for guys by any means.
Yeah, and really, I mean, we're also saying that too because we don't want women who are on the fence or not really that interested just automatically think that this is not for them without even giving it a try.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
But on the other end of that, I'm not going to bring Carcassonne or those types of games over to my mom's house and try to have her learn it.
No, and that's definitely another.
She's gonna be down to do.
Yeah, and that's one thing you got to know, and that's another kind of a con here is that it's not. These games aren't going to be for everybody. If you're, if you don't have the patience for it, if you don't have the desire, maybe it's just not for you. You don't have the mind for those kind of strategy style or things like that. Like it's not something you're going to want to teach everybody to play. You're not going to be able to get your 5-year-old son to play. Now they have kids versions of some of these games, and you could play that, but it's you definitely got to pick and choose which games you're going to bring over to the family to play with certain crowds, and which ones you're able to play with your buddies and your friends. So it's choose accordingly. Don't take a game that nobody's going to get but you over to a party that's just not that for that crowd, because it's not going to go over well.
I think a good comparison would be like everyone has like their favorite movie, and maybe some of those movies it might not be the best understood, or you really have to follow along to really get the twists and things like that. There's some movies that you go to with your friends that are interested in that stuff, and there are some that you just don't want to bring like your significant other to because they're going to have a lot of questions, and you don't have time to answer those questions because you're trying to enjoy the movie. And I think a lot of games are that way too. Like admittedly, a lot of these games are not meant for everybody, as much as we would love for everybody to engage and give it a go. But, not everybody's wired that way. Not everyone has the same interests, obviously. So, the whole idea of, there is a point where, like, if you were to try to get everybody to play a particular game and all it is just people like, well, can I do this now? Can I do this? Can I do this? After a while, it's like you're so focused in playing the game, it almost is a turn off to play with people like that. And it sucks because you want people to enjoy what you like. But then sometimes it's like there are some things that are best left, like, this is my thing, this is your thing, and kind of just leave it at that.
Absolutely. And you'll be able to find, there's so much variety out there that you can find games for everybody. You can find games for certain crowds and games for other crowds. And there's, if it's a game, like you said, Kyle, pick and choose. If there's a game that you really want to play, you'll find the right group to play it with. And we're kind of getting towards the end here. I'd like to kind of spend the last little bit here. Why don't we all kind of give our recommendations? What kind of games board games? Here we can even talk about party games or, dice games or even, card games that you guys think are good recommendations that you would tell our PMPers out there that you would recommend them playing or giving it a shot.
And are we focusing more on like games that maybe people haven't heard of to give a try, or are we also saying like
a little of both?
Everyone's heard of?
You can talk about a little bit. I mean, don't sit there and start recommending Monopoly to everybody, Kyle. But
well, I'm not gonna. That's I don't worry about that with me.
I don't know if you guys have ever heard of the game called Sorry. Fantastic game.
Sorry and Trouble. I'm not sure if we've discussed Trouble or not, but that's one.
Well, you mentioned it on our rundown here, and I don't remember who heard of it. I don't know if it was you or Matt or what. But we first played it at the apartment when we lived together. But I always thought Munchkins was a very fun game.
You know who that was? That was Bruno, actually, introduced.
Oh, you know what it was,
game.
Bruno. That's right. Bruno's listening to this. Shout out to Bruno. He's got a baby, so I doubt he's listening to our podcast. But
you know what? Maybe it's a late at night.
That's true.
The little one's up,
now that he's a father, he has.
Yeah,
he wants
to our lewd and inappropriate comments.
The baby needs to be put back to sleep. Play this podcast. Knock him right out.
He's gonna play this podcast about Munchkins to his Munchkin, right? I guess.
Nice.
But anyway, I thought it was a fun game, and I thought it was a very, it wasn't too simple, but it was simple enough that you could tell somebody how to play and they could pick it up pretty easily. I mean, especially one game. Like, hey, just play one game. You'll get the hang of it as the game goes along.
It helps with that one because the cards, you're playing a lot of cards, and the cards almost tell you what to do on them. So it's a lot of kind of reading the card and just comprehending the game as you go.
But I was a very big fan of that game. I really enjoyed when we played that game, and you could play with multiple people. You know, I don't know if there's a max number of people, but there's also a crap ton of iterations of it. I haven't played it in a couple years now, but I always really enjoyed that game. I think that's a good game to kind of to break into this genre, if you will.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's an easy one to get people into. It's kind of a little for both. It's got some Dungeons and Dragons feel to it, but on a much, I don't want to say cooler level, but they try to make it more funny and kind of.
There's a little humor built into it.
It's almost like a parody version of like a Dungeons and Dragon or something.
Yes, exactly.
Kyle, how about you? So
I think the easiest one to say that is very popular, and it's actually one of the reasons why I go out on Monday nights. One of the biggest.
Oh, look at Mr. Popular over here going out on Monday nights.
Hey, man, when you move away from all your friends, like you gotta find something to do sometimes.
So what do you do on Monday nights, dude? Let's hear it. Let's hear what's cool about Monday nights in San Francisco.
Monday nights in San Francisco, when you're with a bunch. At first, you know, you're meeting with a bunch of, for the most part, strangers. I mean, yeah, you're in like a group. It's not always the same people. Cards Against Humanity is always one of those like default go-to icebreaker type of games because it's so inappropriate sometimes, and it's just definitely an easy way.
It definitely lets you know the crowd. You whip that game out, and you'll know within 10 minutes if this is a crowd that you're going to have fun with, or they're on your level, or they're not.
It's a very easy game of getting to know people without actually asking them what they're like. You can actually find out by the way people laugh and react to, you know, card combinations and things like that. So if you ever move to another city and you're by yourself and you want to create like a group, Cards Against Humanity is actually a very, very good game. It's just a real easy social ice breaking game.
So like if I move to Utah and I'm like in the, you know, heart of Mormon country, like that's probably the first thing I should do is set up a Cards Against Humanity night.
The bigger, blacker edition, especially. Absolutely. But the other one I wanted to give a shout out to, because it's back to kind of the video game adaptation. I've always liked tabletop games, but I've always felt like a lot of them have like that, you know, the especially like the figurine games, like your Warhammers and your Blood Bowls and, you know, the ones where you actually have your own figurines, you can paint them, and you know, you have your little goblins and things like that. But they made a video game version of Blood Bowl, which I know you guys, I got you guys versions of it. And one day I think we still should. I think Hax and I played once. That's a really fun game to play, especially if you like football and you want to kind of like put your, you know, kind of like ease yourself into playing like a old fashioned tabletop game. A lot of the rules apply. You want to score touchdowns and stuff, but also another point of it is you just want to just beat the shit out of the team that you're playing by like knocking them down and injuring them and killing. You know, you can actually kill members of the team you're going up against. Once again, it's called Blood Bowl. You can get on Steam, or once again, you can go to like Side Quest or something like that. And there might be someone there that actually has the Blood Bowl game as well.
Yeah, it definitely kind of like you said. It's something that you can introduce somebody to because it almost has that football meets Dungeons and Dragons sort of feel meets like a
like
chess
Warhammer.
Or checkers
it's
or
like
something
Warhammer
like that.
meets football.
Yeah. So for me, a game I like is called Betrayal on the House on the Hill, and they're actually coming out with an expansion. This game came out like 10 years ago or something like that, just sort of at the infancy of the board game revolution, as I like to call it. And
just Kiser likes to call it that, just like the old revolution.
That's right. But this new expansion they're coming out with, and basically it is sort of like an RPG game, it's like Dungeons and Dragons, very light, but you each pick a character, and the character has stats. They have like intellect, charisma, strength, and speed, or something like that. And you move through this haunted house, and you're it's going to be a haunted house. You move through this house, and you're building rooms on. In each room, you explore, and you get items, and the items might be swords or guns or weapons, and then different events happen throughout the thing, and eventually, and you roll dice whenever you have to do battles with people and things like that to. As far as the fighting aspect of it. But then eventually there's a haunting that takes place, and there's a booklet that comes with it, and it has like 40 different scenarios. And depending on which item caused the haunt and who started it and all this thing, like there's you go through like a grid, and each haunt is a different haunt. And each haunt changes the aspect of the game at that point, and all of a sudden it becomes 3-on-1. Or if you're playing with 4 people, sorry, it becomes one person becomes the villain, and everybody else is like trying to stop the villain. And you have different objectives. The villain's objective in one story might be they have to kill everybody else, or in another one they might have to like complete a seance. And based on that, they have to do various things, meet various requirements to do it. They might have to go into rooms and find certain items, or they may have to do this, that. Like there's so much variations to it. It's a new game every time. And now they're coming out with this expansion, and it's like going to be like 60 new scenarios or something like that. So it's a great time to get into it, with the expansion coming out. And it's something that it's popular enough online that you could go YouTube and kind of watch videos and see how it's done. Great time. And I've actually played with, my entire family, my parents, my sister, they love it. They play it with me, quite often. So, definitely a recommendation on my end for sure.
So I know we have like maybe just a few minutes left. I wanted to ask one thing real quick, just because I always like to know the kind of people that I'm doing a podcast with. I like to judge you guys based on your decisions.
You don't know us yet? I mean, I've
only known you guys 20 years.
I feel like 41 episodes, you should have a good idea who we are.
What I was going to ask was, if you can, like, without even like having a list, what are your top 3 board games, and then what's like one game you fucking hate?
Top 3 board games for me would be...
Not in any order, by the way. You don't think you mean your favorite. Just
no, that's
3
that's
that you
fair.
love and one that you wish burned in a dumpster fire.
I enjoy Tribond. That's what it's called, right?
Yeah, it's Tribond.
Tribond. Scattergories is always a classic, and Pictionary for me. And a game that I hate... you have to give me a second on the hate.
It should be easy to know a hate one.
I'll say if we're doing, I guess all time categories, by far I love categories. Gestures, and I love me some catchphrase. I gotta throw catchphrase on there.
That's a good one as well.
Hate, I don't know either.
Well, like a game
a
game that you really don't have an interest in playing, I guess would be a better one.
I think for me, it's any of those like really generic takes on Parcheesi or something. Monopoly might be the one that I do not have any desire to ever play it. That's probably right up there.
Mine is Blood Bowl.
Oh, that's hurtful.
I'm just kidding.
So yeah, my 3 would be Trivial Pursuit, Risk, and Sorry. As much as we've been kind of dogging and kind of referencing back to Sorry, I actually love that game.
Well, I mean,
I'm sorry to hear that.
It's a dog thing. It's just, it's very simple. That's all. So.
And then one that I just can never be.
Why do you think Kyle likes it, man? He's a simple-minded guy.
I am, and to put on that how simple-minded I am, a game I really could never care to play is chess. I don't know why. I've tried it. No patience. I just don't like it. Never cared for chess.
Fair enough. I've enjoyed chess at times. I got to be in the mood for chess, but I don't have any hatred for it.
Didn't you just play like Yahoo chess or something like that? Isn't that what, like how we all kind of got into, was playing like all the old Yahoo games?
I mean, I used to play chess with like my uncle and stuff like that.
You do? I don't even know anybody that owns a chessboard anymore.
I actually have 2 chessboards.
Well, look at you. Look at you, Mr. Enlightened.
So, in fact, you know somebody who not only owns a chessboard, but owns 2 chessboards.
Fucking communist.
But that's gonna be our show this week. Let us know out on Twitter and Facebook. Go ahead and subscribe on iTunes, but give us some feedback. Let us know what recommendations you like and you know what your favorite and least favorite board games are. Tell Hougie, you know, if you get the Blood Bowl game, he's looking for someone to play with. So feel free to give him a shout out.
Apparently my friends won't play with me.
That's true. That is true.
I'm too busy with a game that. No, back to our spoiler, or back to our, you know, whatever the hell we were going to say earlier.
Dude, seriously, man. You always do that. You always spoil the ending. God. Be more like me, who doesn't spoil these things.
Here's the big announcement. I am actually going on vacation next week. The lady and I are going to Disney World, so I will not be hosting the podcast. Sorry, PMPers, you're going to be stuck with just Haddix and Hougie. And they are going to be discussing the newest expansion
phenomenon
to World of Warcraft, the Legion expansion. So look forward to that next week as they try to host without me. It's going to be tough, guys, but best of luck to you. From the home of Board Games R Us, which according to Manta.com is a single location business established in 2010 that makes $59,000 annually and employs a staff of approximately 1. To the home of Fun Spin Board Games, which also, according to Manta.com, is a single-location business established in 1992 that makes $500,000 annually and employs a staff of approximately 10. I am Josh Kiser, he is Josh Haddix, and he is Kyle Hoagland, and we will see you guys next time.
Have a good Friday.
I feel like at some point we gotta tell people where we're from again. See ya.